You love her voice, you love her looks, what Melissa loves. Oh, comic books. I went a little too high there, didn't I? So, in the months following the release of Action Comics #1, the company known as Detective Comics knew it had a hit on its hands, but how would it affect their other titles? Today, we're going to start looking at the issues of more fun comics from the rest of 1938, from issue 38 through issue 35. There was a lot of change, but not in any way that resembled Superman. In fact, there's so much to talk about that I'm breaking up the remainder of 1938 into two episodes, which is why I'm stopping at 35 today instead of 40. The big news about issue 32 was this was the very last appearance of Dr. Occult, and not just for a little while, not again until 1985. It would be no surprise to anyone who follows this channel that I really enjoyed Dr. Occult most of the time. There were flashes of brilliance, sometimes in plot, sometimes in characterization, sometimes in page layout, but usually not all three at the same time. We haven't seen Occult's girlfriend Rose since she thought he was dead during the Lord of Life storyline, and we missed their reunion when it happened off panel. We don't know if the relationship has advanced any, and we'll never know because the last installment gives us no kind of conclusion. Instead, it reads more like a fresh beginning for the feature. Dr. Occult, who has never been a scientist before, has invented an evil detecting machine that allows him to find out when a crime is being planned. Then Occult and Rose can just waltz through the astral plane, observe unseen, make the bad guys confess their crimes through a hypnosis, and then cast a sleep spell on them. Sort of like Dungeons and Dragons. The bad guys hardly have a chance since they can't even see the good guys to fight back against, and it makes for a very unsuspenseful story. It's sort of Superman-like in that regard, that the bad guys are so heavily outmatched. But why? It makes sense. I mean, it makes sense that Siegel and Schuster would stop working on Dr. Occult to make some more time for Superman, but why retool the feature for one last go? Did they not know the feature was being canceled? Did they know, but they were hoping for one last reprieve if they changed the status quo? Just a tease? To be fair, there was little precedent yet for serial adventures and even comic strips to end with endings that completed the story, but they just discontinued, cut off. Dr. Occult is gone, but the rest of Siegel and Schuster's features continue on. Radio Squad star is Cleveland police officer Sandy Keene, seen here with Jimmy, a different partner this month. Or is he a Cleveland police officer? Earlier installments suggested he was, but in this one, Sandy refers to there being millions of people calling the city home, and that wasn't Cleveland in 1938. This sounds more like New York City. They pull over a speeder and give him a ticket, and boy, does Jerry Siegel seem to really hate speeders. He has Sandy and Jimmy talk about how it should be their job to get speeders off the streets, and how it's a shame that they get off with just a fine. Just as we've been shamed for our own breaking the speed limit, our heroes learn by radio that the man they just let get away was a bank embezzler. They spend all day scouring the city for the man who got away at some of the hundreds of hotels in the city, give up and return to their boarding house where they both live, only to find a new tenant hogging the bathroom, and it turns out to be the embezzler who got away. It's a contrived but fun story, but the important details are the story beats. The precious panels in a tight 6-page story spent on characterization. We see how ashamed Sandy and Jimmy feel about letting the crook escape them. When the police chief says something like, "Hey guys, it's okay, sometimes it happens," that just makes them feel worse. They want to be chewed out, so it's not just themselves making themselves feel bad. When they get home, they talk about going out on dates in order to forget what happened and make themselves feel better. But when the opportunity arises, they can't shirk their duty even though their dates are waiting for them. There is a lot of character development crammed into a 6-page story, an almost unprecedented number of panels devoted to not advancing the plot. The art is largely absent. Almost every panel lacks background and is just a close-up of a face or faces. But since so much of the story is taking place in their heads, it works. Siegel, the writer, is definitely onto something. And the reason he's able to explore all this now is that Radio Squad has just been upgraded from 2 pages to 6 per issue. Siegel is used to working very tight stories here, but instead of making the plots more elaborate, he gives us this instead. So that was from issue 33. Issue 34 is the last appearance of Captain Jerry, a character I've never once mentioned, and for good reason. This feature first appeared only in issue 32. With just 12 pages of published history, this makes Captain Jerry one of the shortest runs in comic book history. Captain Jerry was a South Seas adventurer who went up against cannibals in New Guinea, gains a rival in the villainous Captain Slegg, and then takes on gamblers in this, his final outing. Yes, his run was so short they didn't even have room to spell out Captain, just abbreviated to CAP''N. Captain Jerry was illustrated by Ray Burley, an artist who had got his start in illustrating science fiction pulp stories in 1935, then started in comic books on a similar character, Captain Jim, for Comics Magazine in 1937. He'll step out of the comics field around 1940 and then come back in the 1950s to draw some backup features for Pogo before disappearing from comic books altogether. He will start working for the Eisner and Iger studio in 1939, so maybe he quits Cat and Jim to start apprenticing there. But I suspect that Vince Sullivan was casting around desperately for a winning formula for more fun comics, suspecting the good sales on Action Comics was due to Superman, but not really knowing that for sure yet. I do think that this is interesting that in every age of comics, fans lament that the companies will cancel titles before they have time to find their audience. But this is something that comic book companies have been doing since the very beginning, feature by feature, if not by title. Issue 35 saw a huge shuffling of content for More Fun Comics. First of all, Sandra of the Secret Service, which had been the lead feature of More Fun Comics since the very first issue when it was called New Fun, it's being canceled. Its final installment is bumped from the front of the book to almost the rear and reduced to 3 pages. When last we saw Sandra, assuming we had all read the previous issue, of course, she was in Florida and in a car chase being pursued by thugs. Now she's given them the slip, turned the tables, and is trailing them. They had been torturing a retired gangster, the thugs, not Sandra, with them, torturing a gangster to force him to reveal the location of his secret mansion in the woods. And now Sandra has followed them there. But instead of, going after them and doing something about it, she decides to leave and go for help. Then the gangster is too slick for his kidnappers. His whole house is a giant booby trap, and 2 of them are gassed to death before Sandra finally shows up with reinforcements at the last minute and, well, she saves one of them at least. And that's it. Sandra's gone, never to be seen again. Except in reprints. This issue is also the last appearance of Jack Woods before he switches over to Action Comics. Jack Woods is a 4-page feature. Remember, both Jack and Sandra started in issue 1 as just 1 page each, so this is still an improvement for both of them. Previously, Jack and his sidekick, Chuck, were in Mexico escaping from the cattle rustler Vasquez. Should be Vasquez, but there's no S in it. It's Vasquez. Now Jack has formed a posse to go out and try to find the stolen cattle. Jack and Chuck get separated from the posse, but they hit the jackpot. They stumble onto a hidden valley where 1,000 cattle, or at least we're told it's 1,000 cattle, we see some of them, are hidden away. The valley is guarded by 14 rustlers. Of course, we only see 2 of them, and we're told that there's 12 more in a panel caption, but you gotta believe us on this one. There's 14 rustlers there, and Jack and Chuck get captured again. But Jack is something of an escape artist, slips his bonds, and they shoot their way out, because they're cowboys, they shoot their way out of the valley. Sandra was being drawn, toward the end, by Detective Comics workhorse Will Ellie, I never have settled on that, who I've talked about before. Jack Woods was being drawn by Jim Chambers. Chambers had begun working for Chesler on Star Ranger in 1937 before switching to New Adventure Comics just the previous month to this issue. Also with this issue, Detective Sergeant Carey has moved over to More Fun from New Adventure Comics. Carey and his partner Sleepy are taking a plane ride to San Francisco, which is rather meta since they are traveling from one title to another. And on this plane, Carrie recognizes one of the other passengers and is an escaped murderer. This is outside their jurisdiction, which is kind of cool because usually police detectives in comic books don't think about these things. So they can't seem to do anything about it. Carrie is going to instead send a note up to the pilot about it to inform him. But the murderer, by sheer chance, manages to intercept that note and realizes that they're on to him. He produces a gun. Too bad that there's no TSA back in 1938. Carrie and Sleepy capture the bad guy, though, by ambushing him at the cockpit with a mailbag that they throw over his head before he can shoot anyone. Guess they went postal on him. Carrie was being drawn by Joe Donahue. No, not the Joe Donahue that I went to high school with. Since the character's introduction, and was also Donahue's very first comic book feature. He'll continue to work for Detective Comics through 1941, then switch to Novelty Comics until 1948 when he drops out of the comic book field altogether. I also want to touch on what was going on in Radio Squad this month. Sandy is back to working alongside his regular partner Larry, and they're called into the chief's office to be given a special mission. There has been a rash of robberies at Lover's Lane, so to catch the robber, the chief wants a couple to stake the place out. Now, this is 1938, so hiring a woman to be a police officer is naturally out of the question because girls have cooties. So the logical decision is that one of these two men has to dress up like a woman. It's up to the two officers to decide who's going to dress up, and Sandy pressures Larry into doing it. At first, Larry resists, but when he sees himself in the mirror, he says, "Say, I don't look so bad at that." In the car at Lover's Lane, Larry wants to take the disguise further and rest his head on Sandy's shoulder, but Sandy isn't having any of that. Instead, both men just sit there in the dark, gripping their cold, hard revolvers and their hands in their laps. Seriously. When they see the robber, they both jump out of the car to chase him, but the robber sneaks up on Larry and stuns him with a blow to the back of the head. Still thinking Larry's a woman, the robber wants to steal a kiss from the unconscious lips before running off, but Larry recovers in time and kicks him away. Both officers then overpower the robber and bring him in, but the story isn't over yet. Larry forgets how he's dressed and lets a reporter snap a photo of him, which winds up in the morning paper. Larry is still humiliated when he and Sandy are called into the chief's office that morning. It turns out Larry is a big hit for his dress-up skills, and they want him to be a female impersonator at the upcoming policeman's ball. Be loud and proud, Larry. And on that encouraging note, we're going to wrap up fast because I got to get ready for work. And you are going to have to sit and wait for the next half where I'll talk about the rest of more fun comics from 1938. And I will see you then. But first, like and subscribe if you haven't already, and then I'll see you then.